everyone having like a say or being able to give their opinion or perspective on something gets them to buy into the process.
Hey friend, welcome back. I'm Tyler Sumula, your host of the Growth at Tech podcast, and that is Jenn Rittler, Associate Principal of Moody Nolan's Recreation Practice, which leads a lot of work with higher ed institutions throughout the U.S. And today, we have something a little different for you. We're not talking about how a contract is won, but instead, how you continue to win over clients even after the project has begun, especially when it's a large project with a lot of stakeholders. So here, Jenn shares with us what it means to join a project that is already underway, the unique way that Moody Nolan creates a collaborative environment with their clients, and how to ensure that you communicate effectively with every single client, especially once the project is already humming along. Moody Nolan is one of my favorite firms, and I'm so excited for you to join Jenn and I behind the scenes of the engine that drives their work. And before we get started, a quick shout out to The Studio, my private membership for growth-minded architecture firm owners and leaders. Inside The Studio, you'll access proven strategies, resources, and an unmatched community of peers to help you attract and win high-quality clients consistently. If that sounds like you, apply to join at growthatech.com/studio. That is growthatech.com/studio. And now here is the show. Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to Moody Nolan and how you got started there?
Yeah, great question. So I actually was introduced to the firm while I was a student at Ohio State. The firm does give out scholarships to students and is very involved in the local Columbus education community and community at large. So that's how I first knew of the firm, had some firm visits and able to connect with employees at that time. And then when I was living and working in Chicago, my previous firm, we actually did a joint project together with Moody Nolan. Come to find out later, our firm, Moody Nolan, does a lot of joint projects with other architecture firms. So that's how I was first introduced, with a working relationship. I was actually working out of the Chicago studio, a few days a week, learn the people there and the leadership there. So when I was making my transition back to Columbus, just, connected through those people and kind of got into the Columbus area.
That's awesome. That's a perfect fit. What a perfect transition. And then also great that Moody Nolan is such large supporters of the educational community there in Columbus. It makes such a huge difference. And I think a lot of firms underestimate the value of forming those relationships with the universities because there's so much talent there. And especially, Ohio State is a great architecture program. So it's
Definitely.
in everyone's best benefit to have a good partnership with those local universities.
Definitely. And, we do, still to this day, we do summer internships. We get a lot of Ohio State grads, at least here in Columbus, and also UC in Cincinnati has a great program as well. So we get a good sample of, Ohio Midwest students coming to at least Columbus for internships.
That's awesome. Yeah. Midwest architecture students for the win.
Yes, that's real.
We love them. They're great. Well, I'm so excited to talk about the Penn State Intramural Building with you today because unlike some of the other ones that we've spoken about, this one is actually complete. And it was one of the first ones, if not the first one that you worked on when you were at Moody Nolan. So can you introduce us a little bit to the project, how Moody Nolan got it, how you came to join it?
Yeah, great question. So this is a throwback for me. So this was one of the projects I first worked on when I started at the firm about 10 years ago. And, Moody Nolan, we have this great kind of internal culture. It's like, you come in with your credentials and experience and you're kind of thrown right at a project, right? We really, see a lot of value and potential in staff. So giving them the opportunities to lead, which I was given kind of coming right in through the front door. So I was really excited to be part of this project, the Penn State IM building. And when I came on the project, it was in its third phase of addition renovation. So before I came on, the staff had been working on the project for a few years, right? I think we started working on this project in like 2013 or 2014. And, Penn State is really like that value trusted client. So we had done the renovation expansion over 3 phases. So I came in on the third and final phase, right? So it's kind of like an interesting, point to come into a project, kind of that third final capstone. So really, it was a cool project. It's really transformative to the recreation at Penn State, right? They had this old building that was existing just kind of box, I'd say, right? A series of gyms. And then through our 3-phase renovation approach, we're able to add new dynamic facades and new health and well-being programming to the building to create this kind of holistic student experience for their campus. It's a really fun project to be a part of, kind of stepping in the door at Moody Nolan.
Yeah. I'm excited to chat about it too, because like I was telling you yesterday when we were catching up, so many of the episodes, and probably most of them that will end up happening for this season of the podcast, are about before the projects came to be. But actually getting to talk about a project where you get to kind of jump in the middle of it, and how important those relationships still are, is a perfect kind of continuation of the conversations that we've been having so far this season. So I'm curious, because I know there's kind of something difficult every time when either when you're starting at a new firm, like you were at Moody Nolan, or simply when you're working at a firm, you do get, assigned projects, and you don't always get necessarily a say in what projects you get. So I'm curious as to, what you chose as being meaningful to you in this project and why it was unique to you, because even if we get to decide or not, before that project begins, we kind of have to adopt something from every single project, right? So that way that we're actually motivated to kind of give our best for those.
Yeah, no, that's totally true, right? The architecture industry, it ebbs and flows. So having that flexibility, adaptability to be able to pivot or, dive in on something that you might not be comfortable with or know about, just being able to support like the firm as a whole, I think is a very important attribute. So when I was hired into the firm, I came on to our sports and recreation practice, which focuses, on these project types in higher education, focused on athletics and recreation and sports. So that was the group that I was part of, and those were the projects that we focused on. I was always kind of drawn to that practice area as a young architect, so I was really excited to be a part of, the group at the firm. I think just my kind of competitive nature just drew me to this type of practice, and obviously these important facilities that are places for, health and well-being, just really kind of draw me, right? It's kind of a fun practice to be a part of, and really we're, improving lives through our work in many ways.
Yeah. Well, you kind of get to go back to like memories, I guess, right? That we all have, like in college, and thinking back to those things. And so I feel like so much of the work is a lot of the work that you do now part of, universities, or what is that when universities, other institutions, like what does that look like?
Yeah. So most of my work are on university and college campuses. And another exciting aspect about that is, there's always a component of planning or master planning and a lot of site integration as part of, the architecture. It's always great to visit a campus on a nice sunny day, a lot of activity, and you get to see just the buzz and excitement of, students being on a campus. You can see, faculty kind of meeting up in the quad or in other places. So it's really a fun, dynamic environment to be in. And also, a lot of our higher ed clients are looking to do those 100-year buildings, right? Those kind of long-term buildings that are going to, they're really going to get a lot out of them. So there's also a key component about like flexibility, future flexibility, since these buildings are built to, last a really long time.
And that's a huge challenge. 100 years. That's that's a lot. No. I'm curious, going back to the Penn State Intramural Building, what were some of the initial or immediate challenges that you faced, both personally and just as the firm in general, as Moody Nolan faced now starting this project in the 3rd phase? Because again, we so often talk about these challenges of like winning the work, but those challenges don't necessarily end after the project has already begun, right? You're hitting a project now that's larger. It's got a few different phases. And I know that not only just logistically are there challenges, but I'm sure there's personal challenges that you're facing as well.
Yeah. I think for us, in a 3rd and final phase of a major renovation addition, is we're kind of up against our past performance, right? We keep setting the bar high. We want to deliver to the client, our third and final phase on that project was not our last project at Penn State. Or, it's like they're always kind of building your reputation, and, relationships can be fragile. So really we bring that keen focus to kind of delivering high expectations for the client. So that was really, I'd say, like a challenge we were up against. And
I'm curious about like to help set the timeline for us. How you said that they had been working on the project that Moody Nolan had been working on the project for 2 or 3 years before you jumped in, right? So we're already a few years into the relationship at that point. They're used to working with you all. They're used to working with the team because you were the project architect, obviously, for the project. So there's technical constraints that you have to work around. And then there's obviously the relational constraints around already having an existing client and relationship that you need to work into. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good question. So I think for the relationship constraints, since I came on the third phase, we did have a partner in charge who oversaw all the phases and who was there from day one. So we do, on this project and all of our other projects have that continuity of leadership on a project, and supplement those key staff with additional kind of technical support, since I was brought on as a project architect for the project. So I think we went through just kind of like stitching together a relationship, like bringing me into the fold and bringing me up to speed on the decisions that have been made in the past. So there is like a learning curve, right? When you're kind of jumping into something new, but to having a good support team. And, we did have multiple like full-time consistent team members throughout it. So it was a pretty seamless transition, right? And then, up front to bring me into that relationship with the client, I was involved in the monthly on-site meetings, right? So I think that's just was a great opportunity for me personally, right? To be able to be there in front of the clients and being involved early with the construction manager and the consultant team.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity to be able to do that without being the one that's responsible for everything in that moment, right? Like the partner or the principal is, right? But you get to kind of come in and understand and see what the structure of these meetings and conversations are like. What did you learn during that time period about like how they usually fall into place, what things typically happen during these site meetings, and kind of how decisions are made? Because it's a finite amount of time, right? Like you're meeting, like you said, once a month, but I'm sure there's a lot of conversations and decisions that need to be made during that time.
Yeah, for sure. And, we follow the traditional, architecture design process, schematic design, et cetera. And so the meetings are structured to fit, to meet our design deliverables. I think a big key thing for having, a lot of decisions made in a workshop or short amount of period of time is to have all the players there in the room, right? That was a big component of advancing the work, getting things done, making sure we had the right people in place.
Yes. That's such a huge one that comes up in business development in general, for sure, is that you can't just sell one decision maker on an idea or a concept. You need every single person to be there. And so you can end up wasting a lot of time if you're trying to make decisions without all of the stakeholders actually there. So yeah, that's such an important point to think about. What kind of concerns did the clients typically have during those meetings? And then how did you all address them kind of like live there in the moment?
Yeah. So I think one of the key challenges with like any project today is budget and cost, right? So our construction manager partner on the project was very involved with us doing the early pre-construction services. So what we did was we had a pretty close relationship and we worked very collaboratively. So when it came to evaluating decisions where we had to, find avenues to trim down on some cost, we put together design solutions, and the CM basically priced them. So when we went to Penn State, we had a kind of comprehensive, options to show them and showcase to them with design and with costs, so that we're empowering our clients to be able to make that decision, right? They need the data, they need the facts. So we really pinpoint what do they need to make the decision. and put those options in front of them and guided them to, the decision.
Yes. There is one, there's two kind of really important words that were included that I don't want to pass over. One is obviously options, right? And the second one was empowering, because so often, right, architects will find themselves in a position where they do have to cut something and they don't provide options, right? They kind of just make a decision and then they have to justify that decision. But you're saying you actually came to them with, okay, so there is now a new constraint that's just arrived, budget, something otherwise. And so we have to present options to them. How did you typically think about breaking down those options that you provided to them? Was it based on the budget itself, or was it based on performance? How were those differentiated, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really the way that we practice architecture at Moody Nolan. We call it responsive design, where we evaluate the constraints, whether it's site, budget, et cetera, and put together scenarios for the client to be able to make a empowered choice, right? We're not trying to, we like to say we don't come in with preconceived notions, right? We don't know which direction they want to go on. Obviously projects have budgets and things, but we as architects, we're not always privy to all the information behind the scenes, right? So we have to be a little bit intuitive with our clients and understand that there might be, some flexibility in there, and providing them those options and being able to listen to them genuinely is part of our process. So that helps like us to craft some, interesting responses for their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy. Because I love the work of Moody Nolan, but to know that behind the scenes, some large part of the production of this work and of the things that get put out is exactly what you're talking about. It's this guiding of the client. It's this assumption that we don't have all the answers, that we do need to listen, that we do need to present options, and that it is more of a collaboration, really, to reach the best outcome for both parties in order to be kind of consistent with that output.
Exactly. And, we also like to say, like, we'll put together, a group of options. And we always say your answer is not one single one of these, right? It could be something that's not even on the screen today, or it might be a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one. So I think our iterative process helps with that. And not just, for the Penn State, when I was on board for a more technical solution, I mean, we do this process like throughout the whole project, right? Whether it's an initial concept or, detailing, right? It's kind of part of our process. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So it's not just technical. It's literally for all parts, all phases of the project.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I think that I would imagine that actually probably has a huge reduction in change orders too. I'm sure there's not any data to back that up, but something tells me that would because they actually feel involved, right, in that decision making process.
Yeah, it is a great tool for consensus design, right? Especially working with university clients. Everyone having like a say or being able to give their opinion or perspective on something gets them to buy into the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious, as the project architect on the Penn State Intramural Building, how did you come to approach that evolving design while honoring all of the two phases, like you said, that had done extremely well, but you were kind of competing against those, at least in your own mind, right, to make sure that you were, at a minimum, continuing that same kind of level of attention to detail?
Yeah, that was the challenge. It's like, how does this third and final phase fit in, or maybe stand out a little bit compared to the previous two phases? Like, what's making this unique compared to the others? And what are the top strongest qualities of the previous phases that we want to keep bringing into this design? I think for the third phase, was a different type of program. The third phase had a turf field, climbing and bouldering, and squash courts, and some meeting rooms and other smaller programs. So the program's totally unique, right, than the other phases. But we had a consistent design thread for our big box spaces, where we did a hybrid ventilation technique, where the windows are automated to open and close. So when those conditions are right, when the temperature is right and the prevailing winds are right, and even the pollen sensors are in the right spot, the windows will automatically open and allow the air to come through the turf field and get kind of exhausted up the top. So it creates this really cool indoor-outdoor environment. So that quality we did on the previous phase as well.
The pollen sensors are important, I'm sure, in Columbus. If it's anything like Charlotte, I'm sure those pollen sensors are very are very important. But see, I'm so used to like large intramural buildings or gyms that are basically just like kind of closed off boxes. So you're saying this building had natural light, it had ventilation, it had natural air coming through. Like am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this was a breathing box, right? I think that's another kind of design challenge for these recreational facilities. We have these long span spaces that are very utilitarian, right? Very functional, but still, very performative, and the finishes, the lighting, systems, etc. And so, especially on a college campus setting, how do you articulate the box, right? So that it's dynamic and interesting and drawing in students, right? You want to draw people to these facilities and, in hopes of transforming their own health and well-being. So I think for us with the box, to make it like living and breathing, I mean, it's kind of like gills, right? These windows that open along the base of the turf field so you can see movement from the outside in. Having these, we also incorporated quite a bit of natural light. So there's daylighting and curtain wall along the edges of the box. And also we had a dynamic feature where the curtain wall kind of pops out of the box, right? And this was kind of on the front of the building as well.
That's amazing. So that people it really is like a breathing box. It sounds like that's amazing. And I'm curious about, I assume that were parts of this building still open during the third phase? And how did that squeeze in? How did you work your way around that logistically?
Yeah. So definitely, when it comes to these complex renovation and construction projects, I mean, there's a lot on the line, about keeping the facility operational while construction is happening. Student fees are going towards these capital improvement projects, and, they want access to their facilities and they want to be able to use these facilities during their time on campus. So we're really sensitive to, how can we, manage or phase different construction that happens within the building. That's why it's so important, to have a strong construction manager in place to be working hand in hand with us on that.
All right, just one quick detour. Growth-minded firm owners and leaders, I need you to listen up. What if you had a reliable way to attract ideal clients, communicate your value, and have a heck of a lot of fun while doing it? That's exactly what you're going to get inside the studio. My private membership with some of the world's best firm owners that has quickly become my favorite place on the internet. Inside, you're going to get access to more than 100 proven sales, marketing, and social media growth hacks designed specifically for architecture firms. You'll join our live growth workshops walking you through marketing and sales strategies step by step, and also our live solution sessions where you can get real-time feedback on your challenges from your peers, plus, of course, unlimited 24/7 access to a community of firm owners sharing what's working for them right now. Plus, courses, templates, tools, and so much more. There's honestly just too much value to capture right here. So if you're serious about investing in your growth and accessing exclusive strategies, then please apply to join us at the studio by going to growthatech.com/studio. That is growthatech.com/studio. I cannot wait to meet you. All right, back to the show.
What I don't want to forget about is that there's for sure architects that are listening to this and they're like, but wait, how did Jenn double N, right? How did Jenn double N get the clients to agree to having this performative kind of facade on the outside? So I'm curious about how those conversations went in terms of how you communicated the value of that to the clients on those, I assume, those monthly site meetings that you were doing.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we did, we worked pretty closely with our mechanical engineer on that, and we had, fluid dynamics reports of how the wind would be working across the site. I think what a lot of universities are looking for is what's the next step in like high performance design and sustainability. And this was an element that we could bring to the project in terms of, being a LEED Silver building. And so not only it's like really cool because of the experience, it's also helping with operations, right? There's less load and demand on your systems when you're able to, have the natural air come through and supplemented with our big fans.
There's the design portion, which is what architects always get most excited about, right? And sometimes they only speak to that, which can kind of be a challenge here. But you're saying there's a back end to this too, right? There's the certifications, obviously, that universities want to prove the value that they're giving to the environment around them, right? Through doing this project. But also there's the performative side of things and the operational side of things. And so what does that conversation exactly look like in terms of the long-term benefits, right, of choosing to do something like this, like the performative design versus just kind of the standard, box facade?
Yeah. I mean, us architects, we're involved on a project a few years and then we're kind of on to the next one. But like the owners, operators, they have to live with this building for a long time, right? So we've got to understand from the architect side what our clients' needs are. And yeah, a big part of that is the ongoing operations. So even when we're starting early in the planning process, especially for, the IM building, focusing on, those entry and control points, which is very important for a rec facility, minimizing points of entry, which means minimizing number of staff needed, which obviously goes to their bottom line. So those design ideas are started like early in the process. And also just Penn State is, pretty, on the forefront of sustainable systems. So bringing our expertise and the expertise of our consultant teams to really push the design to help have them have a longer, stronger operating policy.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of any Big Ten school, right, leading the way in terms of sustainable practices. So that's great to hear. What caught my attention in what you were saying there was how you were framing the value that's being brought to the client by using their own language and really their own processes, right? You're talking about the amount of staff that's going to be required, the entry and the exit points, how often things are going to have to be, maintained or replaced in different ways. And I'm assuming that's the language that they care more about, right? While it's like design is the vehicle that you're using to get there. But they care a lot about how you're framing it to them in terms of how it fits into their existing processes, how it's going to impact their ongoing costs and those different things. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is so key to our recreation and wellness practice at Moody Nolan, is that we understand the client and their like long-term needs and values, right? I mean, the practice is really focused on a lot of the functional aspects that the client like has to face, right? With the staff and the maintenance and what do they need to serve, this new turf field for the third phase, right? They actually want, we went in depth with how do they want to use the space. We know what's needed to maintain these systems. So designing, storage that's needed for this area, or advising on equipment that's needed for servicing different parts of the building. It all comes together in part of our process.
How do you keep that top of mind throughout the process? It almost seems like an elementary or question, but I'm very curious, right? Like, is it something that you have a database of their needs and their wants, or of their program, or something that you're always turning back to, or is it about making sure that during those site meetings and during those conversations, and as we're framing ideas and progress to them, it's always back to what those needs and wants and goals are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we do bring a lot of knowledge in doing these types of facilities, right? These are the ones that I'm specifically focused on. I know today we're talking about recreation and wellness. Yeah, I think, at the beginning of every project, like we did at Penn State, we do create like goals and vision for the project. And that's something that we do like look back to throughout the duration of the project.
I mean, those are always changing, right? That's the important thing about that. I mean, just like it happens like almost for a firm's, I don't know, mission statement or something like that, or for their branding, right? These things are always changing as the campus grows or as the budget changes or as external factors are changing. But to always have that North Star, whether it is slightly moving a little bit, I think is important that you have something to map back to always.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, I mentioned about just our strong, experience in history and recreation and wellness facilities and our practice knowledge. Like we're really embedded with recreation professionals. We attend the Big Ten Recreation Conference. We're there and meeting, with fitness professionals, facilities people. So really know like what the vibe is and what the people are looking for. I've spoken at the different conferences about recreation and wellness. So we're really kind of out there in the community as far as thought leadership to really understand our clients more, but also put our names out there like, hey, we're here to listen, here to learn from you, and, here to share what we know.
Yeah. I'm curious how the clients at Penn State responded to the final outcome of the project.
Yeah, it's great. We did a, presentation. It was actually at a Big Ten Recreation Conference. Speaking of that, just about how the design process and how that third final phase really put the cherry on top for them. I don't have like the number on like the daily users, but I know that has like increased significantly. I mean, we know that like a recreation center is like a key part of a student's well-being. So campuses like Penn State investing, capital improvement and, the IM building has brought so much value to the student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think made the biggest difference in the success of that project? I know you were only involved in phase 3, but it's an important phase, wrapping everything up, right? I would argue it's probably a little bit more difficult than only doing phase 1. Phase 3 is kind of the end. You still need to wrap everything up, put a bow on top. But yeah, I'm curious as to, seeing that all the way through towards the end, what you think made the largest difference with it.
So yeah, I'm just kind of reflecting on our work at Penn State, specifically like the IM building. And it's really, kind of reinforced for me that like recreation and wellness facilities aren't just about performance, right? It's about the culture, recruitment, retention, pride, and inclusion as well. I mean, we know that's a big deal on campuses. And yeah, not everyone, is an athlete or interested in working out. So those programs like beyond the gym are really important. So that's definitely been highlighted for me throughout that project. There's wellness spaces, there's places to do a group fitness class, also that passive recreation, table tennis, places to hang out. So it's beyond just working out.
Yeah. I think any architect today can fully relate to that, right? Because I wasn't in the architecture program immediately in my undergrad. I didn't join until my senior year, funny enough. But it was like immediately when I joined, there was I forgot. I forgot you could exercise, which was a terrible decision. But yeah, you're right. There's so many different areas and ways for students to get involved and being able to play a part in, it sounds like, a lot of the different components and options that they have in order to kind of improve their own experience with the university sounds very rewarding. I'm curious about what lessons that you learned in that first one, which probably felt a little bit like, trial by fire a little bit for you, I'm guessing, as your introduction, have carried forward with you into the projects that you do today.
I think, yeah, what really I've taken from, the Penn State IM project and what I reflect on, as I've been here over 10 years is, that really helps just, enforce that commitment to space as being hubs for student life and engagement, visibility, right? Those key things, which I think is kind of a continuous thread along about a lot of work that we do at Moody Nolan. Like I mentioned, the flexibility of these spaces, the long-term value, right? Thinking 100 years in the future, I think that brings a long-term value, right, for Penn State. And also we bring that similar vision to, projects that I work on today.
Yeah. Oh, I'm curious about, because when we were chatting yesterday, you had mentioned you're now working on a project that's kind of similar to the Penn State project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So similar in a couple ways. The project I'm working on now, well, there is it's athletics focused. So we know Penn State is recreation focused, but for this athletic project that I'm working on it's an indoor turf facility. So we have that similar challenge of how can we create a cool environment for students and student athletes to come together in a space, right? That's obviously performance based, and that's where, training and things like that are happening. But how can this be a unique experience for a student athlete on campus? So I think those are the kind of high level questions that we ask ourselves, because we know that like university leadership is always looking for, how am I going to recruit the next student or student athlete? How are we going to make sure our students are happy on campus? And I feel like architecture is one way to make that happen. So whether for my new project, we're looking at what are those amenities outside, like the kind of performative space that can keep the students kind of coming back. What's going to kind of keep them coming towards the space, whether it's a place to like stop in and hang out, stop in and collaborate or meet with a coach or talk with a friend. I think it's kind of finding those no moments and getting to understand the actual students for specific campuses help to drive what those unique aspects are that are part of an architecture project.
I think what's exciting about the work that you do is that there are so many stakeholders involved, right? So as a kind of final question, I'm curious as to what you would, say to other architecture leaders, to the other amazing architecture leaders, that listen to the podcast in terms of your biggest learning in working with these projects that have so many stakeholders, and what you carry forward with you in terms of how to communicate effectively with all of those stakeholders.
Yeah. Well, this is a good question because I mean, yeah, definitely these student life, student recreation type projects have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of users, a lot of people who have a claim and, the success of them. And so really we do start with an engagement plan, right? Who are we going to meet with? Who's going to be involved? And, we go through that process of vetting it with the client because we work with such a variety of institutions. Some want everyone to say something and some want none to say something, right? So we find that right balance, which is going to bring them, stronger outcomes, right? And also, I think it's also part of when we're creating that engagement plan, understanding that there is a hierarchy to some of the decision makers at the table and making that clear to everyone who's involved. Part of our consensus-driven process and our responsive design practice is to being able to create those scenarios and alternatives for different groups and users to have input on. And so we kind of bring that all together and you come with a product that is, everyone's had a chance to look at or be a part of the process. And when everyone's been a part of the process, then it's easier for them to get on board. Like, yes, this is the right way. We're all kind of feeling, we're all on this boat together.
Yeah. That's so important because if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's that you really begin the project by asking the client what type of experience and communication they want, like how they want to be communicated with, how they want you to work with them and what works best for them. And then you adapt based on what the client's needs are, who the decision makers are, and what that looks like. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Yep. That's right. That is part of our responsive design practices. We're really in tune to how our clients work, right? And we don't bring a one size fits all approach when we approach a client. I mean, they're also different. Of course, we bring our expertise and we can adjust to what we would recommend would work for them because we've worked with all different size and scales of institutions, but ultimately it's not our building, it's theirs.
It's funny because it sounds so obvious, right? It seems like it'd be something like, yeah, hey, ask the people that you're going to be working with for many years, how they kind of want to be worked with. But it's easy to overlook, because there's so many things that are happening behind the scenes at the firm in terms of, decisions. And, the second that the contract is signed, you already have people that are working on it, and you have to do, and there's so much work to be done. So it's easy to forget that, but I imagine that that's probably a huge, I'm glad you brought it up, because I imagine that it's probably a huge differentiator in terms of Moody Nolan's success, especially with clients and developing those long-term relationships. It's just understanding, how they want you to work with them.
Definitely. Yeah. It's really like embedded as part of our culture, right? I know we interface with clients in that way, but also like internally as well. It's really a collegial type environment where we're able to bring ideas to each other. We've got a, great collaboration here. And so it extends, not to the person next to me, but beyond, right? It's important that it's kind of in our DNA.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jenn Double N, thank you so much for joining the Growth of Tech podcast. Where can people find out more about Moody Nolan?
Well, we have a great website, moodynolan.com. You can search us there.
Perfect.
We're on social media outlets as well.
Awesome. And are you hiring right now?
Yes. Check our careers page on our website.
Perfect. So go check out Moody Nolan's careers page. I'm jealous if you get a job there because they do amazing work. All right. Thanks so much, Jenn.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, Growth Detect, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are enjoying the show, then please share it with a friend and leave a review so that other amazing architects like you can find us. And if you're ready to attract more clients, confidently communicate your value, and do so with the support of other amazing firm owners, then we want you inside the studio. You can apply to join today at growthatect.com/studio, and I'll see you next time, friends.